Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the OnStage, where we interview entertainers, performers, and true, real people like John Primerano here. Real person, not AI, just in case you ask. Ladies and gentlemen, today we welcome a true Renaissance artist whose talents span music, film, literature, and live performance. Once again, John Primerano is a classically trained singer, pianist, songwriter, actor, and author whose career has captivated audiences across the Mid Atlantic region and beyond. You're a graduate of Temple University's College of Music, of
That's
course,
correct.
and
Right.
you hold a bachelor's degree in composition with concentration in piano. Your
Right.
musical repertoire is a rich blend of timeless standards, easy listening favorites, and heartfelt original compositions. John's critically acclaimed album Somewhere South of Heaven, and you have to listen to it, it's beautiful, which he produced and arranged himself, features live features five original songs and five beloved standards. The album received international airplay and was named Pick of the Month by the UK's Intune International magazine. John's live performances are legendary. He has shared the stage with iconic entertainers such as Jimmy Durante, Woody Herman, Guy Marks, Mickey Shaughnessy, and the delightful, pretty perky Peggy King, right?
Right.
And your music has resonated globally with interviews and airplay reaching audiences in Chicago, New York City, Hawaii, and even Lagos, Nigeria. I remember that one. John's been featured on nationally syndicated programs like Dick Robinson's American Standards by the Sea and the Joy Reynolds Show on WOR Radio, New York City. Everyone, beyond music, John has made his mark in film and television. His acting credits include roles in major motion pictures such as Philadelphia, Unbreakable, Two Bits, Mannequin, and Creed 2, as well as memorable appearances as Father Creighton in CBS's Hack. I think we have actually spoken about how you played that. Was that a priest, right?
He was a priest, yes.
So I know I'm not going to confess anything with you tonight. Okay. He also portrayed Lieutenant Buzz Adams in South Pacific and studied acting under Nick Dana and renowned late Tony Lo Bianco, who was John's personal friend. Sally passed away over a year ago, and this episode will be dedicated to him. And John is also a published author and playwright. His essays have appeared in Vintage Magazine, the Philadelphia Daily News, and books by Richard Grudens, including the Italian Crooner's Bedside Companion and Stardust, the Bible of the Big Bands. He's contributed reflections on legends like Frank Sinatra, Al Jolson, Frankie Lane, and Al Alberts, and penned a one act play titled The Retirement Party, as well as post Civil War novel The Return of Reno Martin. Have you written anything since?
I'm working on something now. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. We're going to
You're
have to
making me
talk.
tired listening to it. That's all it is.
Your head getting too big?
No, it's not.
So, as the owner of, do you still the owner of JPM Records, and you continue to produce and promote your work with passion and precision? But his song "Philadelphia" was even recognized by Billboard magazine for its chart potential among independent labels. Ah, hello, John. Thank you for
Hello,
joining us.
Chris.
Thank you
Nice
for
meeting you
joining us
again.
once again. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the incomparable Mr. John Primerano. So, good
Thank you.
evening, John. So,
Good
for
evening.
anyone who doesn't know who you are, and also I will link your first episode in the description of the video. Um, you started performing professionally at just 15.
Right.
What was
Correct.
that first major gig like, and what was the most important lesson you learned from those early years in the business?
Well, I had s- I had done about 4 years of amateur work, and then I was hired as a piano accompanist for two USO troops,
Hmm.
United Service uh, Organization, and that was a big influence on my life because we went to just about every, in fact, every um, military base around the tri-state area. Went to Fort Dix, um, McGuire Air Base, uh, Valley Forge Army Hospital, Dover Air Air Force Base, um, and this was during the Vietnam War, and I was coming close to draft age, and I was seeing guys that were just a couple of years older than me, and we would get them as they came in, and we'd get them as they were going out to wherever. But we used to do shows in the wards, and they would roll a piano in, and I would play for all the acts, and then they would roll a piano right across the hallway, and I'd play for them again, and we were performing for all the wounded soldiers that were coming back, and I kind of grew up fast with that.
Hmm.
So that was a big impression.
Yeah, I can imagine what that was like, being young age and being almost drafting age. Oh, it's terrible, and having to live through that. Yeah, but yeah, it must have made you feel like, how do I go through this? How do I live like when people around me are dying and yet here I'm alive and not even in the war? It must have been quite a feeling for you. And then you had to go and play music and
Well, I have to say that the guys, and in particular the wounded guys, they were great audiences. They were great audiences, um, and they appreciated everybody's ability and willingness to come out and entertain them.
yeah. Your repertoire, John, is incredibly diverse, spanning standards, bossa nova, and 50s rock and roll. How did you develop such a wide ranging musical palette? And who were your biggest influences as a pianist and vocalist?
I had, I guess you would say, in a way, an unorthodox um, way of studying the piano. I My first piano teacher, his name was Tony Montana, and it has nothing to do with Al Pacino or Scarface. Um,
I know.
very nice man who knew a million songs, and he taught me the rudiments of playing, reading music, and after a couple of years, I got proficient at playing. And then he built my repertoire. He knew I wanted to be in the business, and he would say to me, "You should know this song. You should know that song," because he was a professional musician, and he taught during the day, and he played at night, and he would build my repertoire. And believe me, I learned such a library of music that I was grateful to have him as a mentor to um, show me how to make a living in the business.
Yeah, Tony Montana knowing a million songs. That means he knew quite a lot of songs. And it's very difficult for me to learn one song, let alone, that many. And like my very first time, I sang in a church. And I sang, I don't know if you know the Christian artist Steve Green, but he sang a song called I Can See. And it's about the story of a blind man who can finally see. And I practiced that for weeks and weeks. Finally, here I am standing in the middle of the church with a microphone in my hand, and I'm about to sing it, and I I'm shaking like this, and I sing the first stanza, and then I sing the chorus, and I totally forgot the second part of the lyrics. I'm like, oh my god! So I had to just sing the first, and everyone
Again,
thought it was pretty good. But instead of me saying, "Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate it," I went, "Oh, but I screwed up the first one. I forgot this. I forgot." I said, "Just shut up, Chris. They don't need to know that." So, but yeah, but to know all those songs that Tony Montana, wow, that guy knows how to learn. Like John, you're in a degree in music composition.
yes.
How has your formal training in composition shaped your approach to songwriting and interpreting the standards you perform?
Well, the performance and the writing are uh, two different things, at least to me. What it did best for me was able to, when I recorded, if I did a demo of a song and I wanted to really fill it out, make it a produced demo, my education helped me in that, with in the fact that I would arrange all the background
Hmm.
music, and that's where that it came in. As far as performing, and I got to tell you, there's only one way to learn how to perform, and that's to do it.
Hmm.
You know, you have to do it, and I've seen myself change over the years. Just looking back from my earliest jobs to um, my one man show, and
Hmm.
you see how you come along, and you can only do that by doing it. I mean, today, unfortunately, today there are no places around to be able to do it, make a living at it, and learn if you're so inclined. There's always been people who just come in and want to perform, play, and it's like a night out bowling for them. That was never me. Everything that I did, everything that I studied, um, like vocally and on the piano, um, which was they were private lessons. I always tried to maintain the technique and of what I learned. It sounds like I'm being uh, what's the word I'm looking for? It sounds like I'm crossing over, but the writing education came into play, as I said, in recording and doing the arrangements, and the performance was just something that I did by doing.
I remember the last time we met, you were telling a story about your grandmother getting you a piano. Can you share that story again? That's a beautiful story.
Oh, sure. Yeah. As a kid, I was I don't know. I guess I was 7 or 8 years old, maybe even a little younger, and my father used to say that every time we would take a ride to the seashore, that I would stand in the back of the car and sing,
Hmm.
excuse me, to every song that would come on the radio. And other things gave him the idea that I had some interest or bent towards music. And so one day they asked me if I would like to take musical lessons, and I said yes. And we were trying to decide on what instrument to play. And as a kid, I was saying a saxophone or a guitar or something like that. And my folks, I don't know, I don't know if they didn't see that or what, but it didn't strike them as the instrument for me. And we were going to talk about it again. Well, I guess my grandmother, with whom we lived, my maternal grandmother, I guess she must have heard the conversation because we were in the kitchen. We were talking, and where I went to school, the school was built in 1899, and it had no cafeteria or anything of that nature. So we would go home from school for like an hour, have lunch, and then we'd have to be back in school. We'd break at 12 and we'd have to be back at 1. So this was right before Christmas. And my doorbell rang, or our doorbell rang. And I answered the door, and there was a man standing on my step with a clipboard. And I asked him, yes. And he said to me, "We're here with the piano." And I said, "I think you had the wrong house." And he said no. He looked at the address was on the wall, and he checked it on his manifest, and he said 3056. He said that's what I got. He said where, where would you want the piano? And now I'm an 8-year-old kid, and he's asking me where do I want the piano? So I called my mother, and my mother came. She said, "What's the matter?" I said, "There's a guy on his doorstep saying he's got a piano that's supposed to come in here." And my mother didn't know anything else. She said, "You got the wrong house, mister." And my grandmother came from the back of the house where the kitchen was, and there were row homes in Philadelphia. And where you ate, the kitchen was another little room where the stove was and the sink was, and you could prepare things in there. And I guess she must have been there or whatever. She came through the back of the house like a Scud missile,
Oh wow.
and right through, and she pushed everybody out of the way, which was me and my mother, and said, "Bring it in right here." She brought the guys brought it in, and we had against the one wall we had a Stromberg Carlson um, record player and radio, and she said to the guys, "Move that out of the way." I remember her giving these guys orders. She said, "Move that out of the way and put the piano where that was." And my mother and I are like stunned. Said, "How did this happen?" My grandmother, unbeknownst to anybody, went into downtown Philadelphia and went to Wurlitzer's, saw a piano that she liked, didn't know one note from the other, didn't know if it was a good piano or a bad piano or whatever. She looked at it. It was a spin it model that Wurlitzer made, and she bought it. And as it turned out, it was a very good piano. And I'm trying to think. Tony was playing in a place where my father tended bar part time, and my father spoke to him and said, uh, "Can you take my son on as a student?" And Tony said, "Yeah." He said, "It's pretty close to the end of the year." He said, "I'll be putting some new students on my list." So he says, "Let's wait till after the first of the year." He said, "But I'd like to see the piano." And my father said, "Fine." So they made a time, and Tony came around the house, and we all were in the living room, and he sat down and he played, and I was fascinated. I mean,
Mm,
my eyes were like two saucers.
wow.
And I remember my father saying to me, do you think you'll ever be able to play like that? And I had no answer for that question because I had never even touched uh, a piano. So I started at the end of January, and that was it. That's how I got involved with it. But it
Wow,
was
and I
my grandmother that just went, didn't say a word to anybody, which was her usual modus operandi. And she went down, she bought the piano, and it was delivered.
and I believe you have the piano right now in your living room, I think?
You do, yeah, it's right over here.
Steinway?
No, it's not Steinway, it's a Wurlitzer.
A Wurlitzer. Oh,
Wurlitzer,
wow.
yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What a story. And you have that to remind you of your grandmother.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I could never, I could never practice before I washed my hands. To touch the piano, and a world class concert pianist with whom I studied many years later. We were we had gone to be friends, and I used to tell him that, and he'd say to me, he was a small guy. He looked more like a hood
Hmm.
than a piano instructor. And he said to me, "She was tough, huh?" And I said, "Oh yeah, yeah." I said, "I washed my hands before I practiced."
That was quite a story, John. I loved it. I loved it. Um, so my father back in the '90s, we bought a brand new VCR, and he had his hands and fingerprints all over it. So after he passed away, I kept it and I used it. He said, "Why do you have an old VCR?" Because my dad handled it. His fingerprints are on it. Leave me alone. So eventually, after maybe 10 years after, I decided, okay, it's time to. I think I give it to my brother, whatever. But yeah, it's like I bet you if they search for fingerprints on that Wurlitzer, they might find your grandmother's still on it.
It's possible. Yeah, it's very possible.
Yeah. So
Maybe even the guys who delivered it.
that's true.
But I doubt it really. That it's been around for quite some time. So
So yeah, I know that when you were 15, you met Jimmy Durante, and I know you told me that you didn't sing with him, but you just met him for glimpse. I think.
well, he was on a program that I was on, and
So, and Von Monroe as well. Is there one particular encounter of collaboration that stands out as the most memorable or impactful for you?
um, well, Durante didn't have a lot of time. He was appearing at a nightclub in Philadelphia, and between shows, he came up to do the performance that I was in because what we were doing was a big anniversary show for Police Athletic League, and when he was backstage, mothers of some of the kids had brought cameras and they were snapping pictures of him and everything. And I didn't have a camera. My folks were in the audience, and everybody had rushed to the back of the stage, and for some reason, I had a family that took pictures of everything, and that night, nobody thought of bringing a camera.
Hmm.
So, what impressed me about Jimmy Durante was that he had time for everybody. He took pictures with people, he signed autographs with people, and he had his other guys there, his troupe, Eddie Jackson, and at that time Sonny King, and but everybody's attention was on Jimmy Durante, and he would take a picture and he would pose. He would just have that Jimmy Durante look, in his eye, and he could do it like that. And he went out and knocked them dead. And I was in the second half of the show, and it was a tough act to follow.
Yeah, and the big bulbous nose of his as well.
Yeah, that was for real. That wasn't a joke. Uh,
So the way he portrayed himself on TV is the way he portrays himself in real life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was what you saw was what you got. You know,
Yeah,
a real as big as of a star as he was. You know, a real gentleman, a real mensch. You know.
yeah. I used to like Jimmy Durante, James Cagney, you name it. I was a big Burt Lancaster fan. I was
Mhm.
a big Kirk Douglas fan. I Gregory Peck fan. Jimmy Stewart. I was a big Jimmy Stewart fan. It's terrible that many of them are now long gone, but
Yeah.
um, nothing's the same. Like, who are the Jimmy Stewarts today? Who are the Jimmy Durantes today? You know.
No, the world has changed so much that you and you know to say something like that, and I don't mean you. Everybody says it. You know, I've said it myself. But when you really stop and think, how would you replace somebody like that? They're individuals. You know, you're never going to replace anybody. I understand what you're saying. Who's going to come up and be like that? I don't think anyone today. I don't think they came from a time when um, there were gossip columnists and there was people wanted to read about who was doing what, where, who was appearing, and I don't think that's the way things are today. You know.
So I take it that if they were to provide you a chance of a lifetime and pay you lots of money to appear in a new film with an AI version of Jimmy Durante, you would say no. What's the
I
ethics?
may do it just out of nostalgia, you know, but
Yeah.
I don't see that happening soon. Excuse me.
You would have to get a 15-year-old photo of yourself and a photo of Jimmy Durante during that time, and use AI to animate it and literally have you singing with them. That would be something. But um,
There's a photo over here. I don't think we could see it, but I think I was 18 or about 18 years old when it was taken, and they could use that.
yeah.
That would be close enough for jazz, as we say. You know.
So yeah, your CD "Somewhere South of Heaven." You're not only one of the artists, composer, and producer, but Sal Centola was a performer and Rob Cochran was a performer. And that CD was named Pick of the Month by Intune International UK. What was it like receiving that kind of international recognition for your original work?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I was kind of bowled over. I really was. Um, they had the gentleman who did those reviews was named Robert Rice, and we had spoken, and he said to me, "Your CD is going to be the pick of the month next the next issue." And I thought, "Wow, that's nice. Maybe he'll just put a thing in there." But he did a 2 column article, song by song, you know, and he he had made a little bit of a cliffhanger in his column the previous month. It was a monthly, and he said, "Stay tuned to this column next month because we have." I forget how he worded it. Basically, like we have like a surprise for you, or we have something that you'll really be interested in. And I saw that, and then the following month, I read his review, and it was quite a review.
What kind of performer was Sal Centola and Rob Cochran? How did
Well,
they kind of compare to you?
Sal's a drummer, and he had the studio where recorded. He's a great engineer, and he knows recording backwards and forwards. And Rob is a wonderful bassist, and but both, you know, I think I think our abilities were on the same level, so um, that was nice because there was no overshadowing. I had gone to a concert to see this teacher that I had studied with, the one that made the comment about my grandmother being tough.
Mm.
And I had seen him in a trio setting. It was um, piano, violin, and I forget. I don't know if it was cello or viola. Anyway, the point is that he was so great that, not saying anything about the other two musicians derogatorily,
Mm.
but he stood out from the other two,
Mm.
and you could hear that, you know. And on the CD, I don't think uh, we have anything like that. I think it's a real even match, you know.
Yeah, I love your singing voice. That CD is absolutely it's grand. I just love the way you sing. Remember there was that one song I liked so much I kept singing it. um but you became acquainted with Frankie Lane and were friends with Al Alberts of the Four Aces. What was the best piece of advice you ever received from one of those legendary performers?
Well, with Frankie Lane, he had done the introduction to the book, The Italian Crooner's Bedside Companion, and that's how I got to know him. And we would message each other back and forth. He was a real gentleman, a real nice man, and he just said to me, you know, keep doing what you're doing, and keep the music alive. And Al had a TV show on one of I don't know if people remember the UHF channels,
Yeah,
and
we
and
had
uh,
that.
and
Definitely.
he came on TV on one of those channels, and I had grown up listening to records that he made with the Four Aces, and on Saturday afternoons we used to play the records, the 45s in the house, and I
Yeah.
some of my favorite songs that I would sing to were Al Alberts and Four Aces songs, and Al had encouraged me as an arranger,
Mhm.
and I remember my first my first job was for down in Atlantic City,
Mm.
and this was a decade before gambling came in. So I was only about 18 years old, and I was playing a club in North Wildwood, or in Wildwood, New Jersey, excuse me, and I knew him, and my folks, they, ever since I had been a kid, they took me to these amateur shows and things like that, because I certainly couldn't drive or anything, and but I couldn't go into the club because I was underage. And the three of us went to see Al, and I went backstage and got into his dressing room, and we were talking, and I think probably the nicest thing anybody had ever done for me
Mm.
was, when our conversation was over and the show started, he came out and he was doing the show, and about halfway through the middle of the show, he stopped and he said, have somebody in the audience tonight, he said, that was uh, on my TV show. Now, the TV show on the UHF had been canceled, and then he eventually got on the ABC affiliate
Hmm.
in the Delaware Valley, and was on for many, many years. And what he did was he stopped and he mentioned my name, asked me to stand up, and he said he's now starting his professional career. We want to wish him a lot of luck. And the audience broke into applause. And I have to tell you, for like an 18 or 19-year-old kid, that was pretty heady stuff. You know, he was very, very, very nice. Uh, I think one thing I learned from him, like Jimmy Durante, was he was a nice guy. He was a nice guy on stage. He was a nice guy with uh, the audience, and he was a nice guy in person. Had time for people. You know, there was never any "excuse me, I'm a star," you know, and walk away. Um, they knew that the people made them, so they always had time for them. So being around that, you know, always um, it seemed to be. I was fortunate to be around people that did not have a great deal of conceit. I mean, people, known people who were not conceited. You know.
Mm-hmm. What about your what about your contributed reflections on legends like Frank Sinatra, Al Jolson? What about them?
Well, Richard Grudens, the late Richard Grudens, and I had become very good friends from the Italian Crooners book. There was a chapter on me in that book, and it was just about every Italian American singer there was. And then he had a section called the Newer Fellows, and I was in that section. And he knew that I had done some writing, and he asked me if I would contribute essays
Mm-hmm.
to some of his books. And he had some other people in the business do the same thing. And the first one was Al Jolson. And then Frankie Lane passed away. And he wrote a biography of Frankie Lane. And he asked me to write something about that. And I gladly wrote um, about what I felt and understood about Frankie Lane. And when he died, I had sent a mass card. That's um, a perpetual mass card that Catholics will do when someone uh, passes away. And in return, I got a whole program of the funeral from
Mm.
his family. And so I wrote what I felt about Frankie Lane and these other. And then after Frank Sinatra passed away, Richard decided to write a book called Sinatra Singing, which kind of has to be explained, I think, a little bit. What he meant was Sinatra style singing, the genre that Frank Sinatra sang in the traditional standards or traditional pop, even like with the songs like "That's Life" and things like that. Uh, and he said to me, "Do me a favor and can you give me an essay on what made Sinatra different?" I said, "Richard," I said, "there's like a million books on this fact alone, you know? I mean, if anybody read the Life magazine article in April of '65, where he talks about uh, how he improved his breath control, and which is what I followed, which is I did what he did, and so consequently my style fit right into
Mm.
that sonata thing. But I said, what am I going to say that hasn't been said? So he said, well, you'll think of something.
Mhm.
And he left me hanging there. So I wrote an essay called What Made Sinatra Different? The Art of Vocal Audacity. And it goes into talking about how he delivered songs of heartbreak and um, the swinging songs that he did, and it actually came out pretty good. And I was surprised because I didn't know what I was going to write that had not been heard before.
Mhm. With my respect to the passing away of your friend Tony Lo Bianco, can you can you give me a story of how you guys met and how did that friendship come about?
Well, it is a bit of a story. I um, In the late '70s, I was appearing at the Kite and Key room of the Benjamin Franklin Hotel in Philadelphia. And there was a show called Sugar Babies with Mickey Rooney and Ann Miller.
Yeah.
And they were playing Philadelphia. And there was a singer actress named Ann Jillian who was in the show.
I
And
liked her.
her and her husband would come in to the Kite and Key room after the show was over, have something to eat or whatever. And um, I would see them just about every night, and I got to know them. And her husband Andy, who I guess it's going to be close to 3 years now that he passed away. He was such a nice guy. He was a really nice guy, and he and I hit it off. And um, some years later, they did a TV movie called The Ann Jillian Story because um, unfortunately she had a double mastectomy right as her career was really taking off. I mean, she was going on USO trips with Bob Hope, and this was something that unforeseen that life enters. And um, so when they made the movie, Andy told me that they had other actors in mind. Now, Andy was a dark complected guy like me with dark hair, and they wanted a blonde, kind of Southern California looking guy to play. And
Hmm.
they said no, it's not authentic. So they said, well, who do you want? And they had just finished seeing Tony in A View from a Bridge, in which he was a Tony Award nominated, I believe, if not won. And so the producer said, is he available? And they said, contact him. So he played Andy in the movie. And I had seen The French Connection, and I had seen The Seven Ups, and I had seen Tony in a lot of movies.
Hmm.
Well, I was spending a lot of time uh, at home acting as a caregiver for my folks. And one night I was on a computer, and I don't know if I guess it was LinkedIn or something, and various things were coming up, and it said, "Do you endorse Tony Lo Bianco as an actor?" And I said, yes. And I wrote a little thing in there. And I said to him, I know your alter ego, Andy Mercia, and I got a response. And then a couple of years later, after my caregiving days were over, I got a message on the computer saying, if you're going to be in New York, I'd like you to be my guest to see my one man show about Fiorello LaGuardia. And I said yes. And I got a ticket for Carol, the girl I see.
Mm-hmm.
And we went up to New York. And I wrote back to him and I said, will you have time after the show where we can meet in person? And he wrote back and said, of course. Because by that time, he knew that I knew um, Ann's husband, Andy, and the emails were going back and forth from New York to California to Philadelphia. And it was just one of those kind of things. So after the performance, and it was a masterful performance, um, we met. We had pictures taken, and probably one of the most, if not the most, gracious person I've met in this business. And we spent some time talking, and people were behind me wanting to speak with him. So anyway, after speaking with him for a while, we said we would stay in touch and everything. And I guess about a year later, he decided he wanted to go back and do some teaching. He had taught in the early part of his career, and he put a message out to see if me and some others would like to attend his course, which was in New York City.
Wow.
And I said, yeah, I'd like to. So we had an interview, and uh, I told him some of my acting backgrounds. I said, music is the way I make my living. That's first and foremost. I said, but I've done some commercials. I've done some what call industrial films. I said I've done a lot of background work in multiple movies. So we spent an hour talking, and he put his hand out and said, "Welcome to the class." And so I used to go from Philly to New York every Wednesday to study with him. But as I said, I knew him prior to becoming a student with him, and
Hmm.
he he was a very nice man, very talented actor and director. He directed things like Police Story and
Mm-hmm.
he various TV shows, and it wasn't something that I didn't know because I'm kind of kidded about wherever I have to be. I'm always early, but he made it a he made it uh, very important that if anybody had left his class to and had got into a play or something like that, to always arrive 15 minutes early for rehearsals, for the show and things like that. And he used that in the classes. We
Hmm.
had we had class from 12 noon to 3 in the afternoon, and but you had to be there at 11:45. You had
Mm.
to be there at quarter to 12 in order to be on time. Because if
Oh,
you got
wow.
yeah, if you got there at 12 when the class started, you were late. And coincidentally, when I first started playing, I used to arrive at places like a half hour early and uh, hang around. And but that that stuck in my mind that we were thinking along the same lines.
Wow.
He had, he did this thing called Just a Common Soldier, and he recites a poem about a soldier, and I don't know how many views it has now. It's over, I think it's over 20 million views
Hmm.
on, on a computer, and he won 2 Emmys
Hmm.
for that, for performance and I think for the production.
Wow. Yeah, that was quite a good actor. Just too bad he's gone now. Wow. So, John, yeah, what was your motivation for painting a one-act play titled "The Retirement Party"? What exactly was that one about?
I'll tell you exactly, and if you want to believe this, um, I think you know me well enough that if I
Yeah.
tell you something, it's true. But I don't generally tell a story. But my my right hand, this is true. I was shaving, getting ready to go to work one night, and the story, beginning, middle, and end, popped into my head. I had the whole idea during my time shaving,
Really?
and yeah, and I went to work, and I had that in my head. And the next day when I came home, I sat down and I began to write it, and it turned out to be a one act play. And um, right now, I've had a few people that were interested in producing it, but as as it stands right now, that didn't happen.
Wow.
I had and I don't really want to get into much of this, but I had something interfere with my career, and that was the surgery I had last year,
Hmm.
and so everything kind of basically came to a halt because it was it it took a year for recovery, and it's past a year now, and I'm still not 100%. Uh,
Yeah.
so I haven't excuse me I haven't really followed up on the the play or too much of anything because I was going to therapy and things like that.
Yeah.
So
You told me
anyway,
the whole story on the phone. That's quite a battle you went through. Wow, I'm so glad you are where you are, and that things have been handled in the way they should be. But you're still not 100%. But just day by day, my friend, day by day.
Mhm.
Talk about battles. What's the post-Civil War novel, The Return of Reno Martin, about? Like, whatever prompted you to write that?
I can't say that I write fast when I write, but the problem is sitting down and writing. Um, I had an idea when I was in college. I had an idea. It was in 1970, and I I jotted down at the beginning of what I thought was going to be a short story, and I never got back to it because I was very busy with my studies in school.
Mm.
Um, you Not only was I in the College of Music, I also had to take academic subjects. And anybody who's ever been in college knows that every class, the instructor treat you like it's the only one you're taking, you know, so they give you a lot of work. So I put that aside, and I found a couple of years later, I found one of my notebooks, and I began to read that, and I thought, "Now, this was a kind of a good idea," and I wrote some more. Now this was like 2 years later when I was out of school, and I was traveling. I was living away, and I was working 7 nights a week. Then I was working 6 nights a week. I got an engagement that had a night off, and after my first year, they wanted me to come back and work 7 nights a week. So it wasn't really conducive to sitting down and thinking about the story. In fact, I forgot about it.
Hmm.
And many years later, I came across the same book, and I said, I really ought to sit here and finish this thing. So I did, and it turned out to be 64 pages long. And I thought, if I can make it 64 pages, I could fill it out and go for maybe a novel, and if not, maybe a novella.
Hmm.
And a guy whose work I read, his name is William Lashner, and He's from Philadelphia originally, but he's a best-selling author. And I was able to connect with him and talk to him, and we discussed the story. And he said to me, "Novellas, there's not much call for that." He said, "I think you can flesh that out a little bit." And his story is about a Kansas town that was all pro Union when the
Hmm.
Civil War breaks out, except for one fellow. And he joins the Confederacy,
Mm.
and he becomes the pariah of the town. And the story is about him coming home to that town and finding a lost love, finding that the only relative that he had in the town, his mother had passed away, because everyone in the town thought he was dead because his name showed up on a casualty list.
Mm.
So when he comes into town, everybody's surprised, but no one welcomes him back.
Oh, wow.
And he finds one man in the town who overlooks the fact that he was in the Confederate Army, and he's the only one in the town. And he runs into people in the town who lost loved ones in the battle, and he finds his girlfriend he left behind. He finds her married, and
Mm.
it's about what happens um, since his whole world is turned upside down. He didn't know that he was reported dead,
Wow.
and when he comes home, you know, people are surprised, but they don't go out of their way to be friendly.
Yeah, wow, that's quite a story. You got quite an imagination there, John. I was looking at your IMDb, and I find it a fascinating mix of major film productions like Creed 2 and Unbreakable. So, how does the discipline of acting on a film set compare to the spontaneity of performing live music?
Oh, well, pretty much. Uh, those experiences that I had, I didn't have a great deal of control over. I had a specialty role in Creed 2 where I played a Russian reporter, and you just kind of you're told what needs to be done, and there's not a great deal of uh, controlling the situation on your own. You just have to imagine yourself in that role. As far as music is concerned, there's a great deal of creativity in it. If you're writing a song, of course, you're creating something out of nothing. And if you're interpreting music, whether it be a pop tune or whether it be a Beethoven sonata, you there's a lot to put yourself into to make the performance work. And I'm not saying that people don't do that in acting in principal roles and even some character parts and everything. They take the role over, but there's a they say movies are a director's medium. It's
Mm.
it's it's what the director wants and what he pulls out of the actor. Uh, Being a soloist in music, it's all up to you to interpret what the composer wanted, or even in a song, what the songs mean. I worked with a young man um, who had been a student of a friend of mine, and he had gone as far as he could go, and he wanted to know if I would teach him.
Mm.
And this guy was a friend of mine, and he said, "Well, as far as I know, John doesn't teach." And I didn't. I never had any desire to do that. And he called me on the phone and he told me all about this young man. And he said, he's good. He has talent and everything. He says he wants to play the way you play. And I said, all right. I said, for you, I'll work with him. So again, it was rather unorthodox. And I let him pick. He knew how to play. He knew how to read music. So we're starting like here instead of here. And but some of the songs that he would pick or I would find, he had some difficulty putting across because they were melancholy, nostalgic, that kind of thing. And his personality wasn't like that. He was bright, and he said, I like the sunshine and everything else like that. And the odd thing was, we were working on some uh, exercises, and we actually fell into working on some Bach, what they call two-part inventions,
Mm.
and he loved it. Most people, walk away with their fingers like this, and he loved it. The metronomical way of playing, you know. And I said to him one day when we were working on a song, and he said to me, "I don't know, this song is too dark for me." And Carol said to me, "What does he do for a living?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "He really didn't get into that." So I said to him, "What do you do for a living?" And he works with computers,
Mm.
things that are very regimented, you know, and that's why he did very well doing the exercises and the Bach, because it's very, as I said, it's very metronomical, like a metronome. And I would say to him, read the lyrics and find out what the song is saying,
Hmm.
and then put yourself in, make those lyrics touch you and have it come through your fingers.
Mm.
And um, I think that's one way of controlling the performance as a musician, as opposed to, well, you could do it as an actor in other parts, you know.
So, as both a historian and performer of this music, why do you believe these classic American standards continue to resonate so deeply with audiences today?
Because they're great songs, and if the younger people take time to listen to them and not think, "Oh my God, that's my grandfather like that, or my grandmother like that. That's elevator music and whatnot." If they would take the time to listen to some of those recordings and some of those songs, they would find that the lyrics are concise
Mm.
and they are um, clean, and there's no profanity in them, but um, the lyrics make sense and they are extremely touching. Whether it's a happy love song or if it's an unrecorded love song, they're very, very touching. And
Mhm.
I think there's a vast amount of people out there who, once they get turned on to that, for whatever reason, maybe it was their parents' favorite song or something, and they are mature enough now to say, "Hey, that was pretty nice," and maybe I'll listen to another song. I think they find that out, and I think they become fans of the music, and that's why when I was playing, they were called standards. The songs had been around for years before I knew them,
Mhm.
and they're called standards. Today they call them jazz standards because for some reason they have to give a title to everything, and I guess the people who are playing these things don't want to say it's a popular song because a popular song connotes something else today. So now all of a sudden, like My Funny Valentine is a jazz standard, but it's a it's a standard song that a lot of people like.
Well, thank you so much, John Primerano, for being my guest once again. Really appreciate you and your music, and those are wonderful stories, especially about the Wurlitzer. Your grandmother's Wurlitzer was a nice story, and
Oh,
how you met
thank you.
Robert Stack. Excellent.
I
Everyone, it will be linked down below in description and his music, and we'll try to get a link to his CD as well. Thank you, John. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I enjoyed doing your show, and I consider that you and I have become friends because of it. And
Oh yeah, we've been friends for a
um,
couple of years. I really appreciate that.
and again, thank you for having me back on. Uh,
You're welcome. Okay, we're gonna end this stream, everyone. Wait right there, John. See everyone.